Start off our session for the interdisciplinary ethics education, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our chairpersons. Our first chairperson is Reverend Dr. Pablo Requena. Welcome, sir. He is an associate professor of bioethics and the secretary of the Moral Theology Department, Pontifical University of the Holy Cross at Rome. His co-chair is Professor Telma Rejane. She is a professor, College of Health Sciences, graduate program in Bioethics, University of Brasília. I extend a warm welcome to both of you, and over to you. You can please start. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to this last season of today. I think the people didn't know that this was the best panel of the afternoon. But I think it's a very interesting topic, and I'm sure that we have learned a lot for the experience of the people you have invited to participate in this panel. Teaching ethics in healthcare present a universal challenge. You all know, because in one way or another we all are dedicated to teaching ethics and we know how difficult it is to connect mostly with young people. This is why it's important just to share our ideas, our experience. I don't want to take time from the speakers, so I will be very brief, but I would like to share with you a paper I read a couple of years ago. It was written in 1980, so a long time ago, by Dr. Lubin Requena. So he was the chairman of the Department of Medicine in the State University of New York for almost 40 years. When he retired, he asked the dean of the School of Medicine to go through the regular courses, just to understand what was happening with the teaching of in the medical school, because he realized that the young doctors arrive to his service with a very poor, little humanitarian sense of the medicine. So he wanted to know what was happening in the years of the formation. So he repeat the School of Medicine after retirement, and he did every lesson, every single exam. And after this experience, he wrote this paper with the title Medical School Education 1975-1979, A Student's Perspective. His conclusion was striking and troubling. Even the most fundamental principles of medicine are routinely violated within the medical schools themselves, particularly the principle that the patient should come first. So I thought that this could be a good start point for our conversation this afternoon. I call for our speakers. The first one, we have changed the order, but I would like to call Dr. Olinda Teams.
We will have Alberto, he's online, so we take him now.
Okay, so we change. Alberto, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, he's waving.
Hello.
Oh, it's nice to hear you.
Es una pena que no estés aquí con nosotros.
It's a little bit distorted the sound.
Well, we are very sad not having you here. So, Professor Alberto García is full professor at the Pontifical Atheneum Regina Apostolorum in Rome, where he teaches philosophy of law.
I do hear now.
Can you hear me?
No, only through her phone.
Okay. Well, I finish the presentation and then we move. Just for the people here, he knows who he is. So he teaches in the Pontifical Atheneum Reina Apostolorum, philosophy of law, international law and European legal framework, and constitutional law. And he has worked in different projects in UNESCO chair. He is talking this afternoon about a very nice topic, educating through beauty, bioaesthetics and global bioethics in teaching. The floor is yours.
It's a UNESCO chair established in two Catholic universities, Regina Apostolorum Atheneum and the Università Europea di Roma. And within this initiative, we have been working for around 8 years, trying to think about bioethical issues in the light of human rights, and specifically in an area we call bioethics, global art. And this is what I want to share with you in this presentation, and is to what extent education through beauty can help us to teach and to make flourish people, young people, contemporary people, and how we can, what we call bioaesthetics can converge and help to a global bioethics approach in teaching. And to this purpose, I will try to give some steps. First one, to what extent in our current world, very polarized world, we need more and better ethics education, more ethics and better ethics, especially in a society around the world where the digital and emotional cultural context are colored by the new technologies and emotional approaches to the human existence. And that's why educating through beauty might be a path that we should explore in education. Beauty as see this butterfly that is like a transforming from a bird to a butterfly, a nice butterfly, colorful butterfly, and how we stimulate and inspire ethics and virtue to teachers and disciples, to professors and students in the field of education, but also in the society, how we can impact also the world of artists, gallerists, and the different disciplines or different sections of art. And by doing this, we claim that we can help to make flourish by the transforming power of art in human behavior. So where the aesthetic experience can help us to communicate, to educate, to show the truth, the beauty, and the good that is contained in universal principles, in universal rights and universal duties. I think it is a matter of fact that we live in a challenging context in the north and south regions of the planet, in the east and the west. Why nowadays our young people, and not only young people, are influenced by graphic and digital communication. So basically we also adults move predominantly in emotional and inclined to sensory experiences. And so in the field of education, I think it's imperative, as it is the title of and the topic of our conference, that we should rely not only in traditional methods of teaching, the traditional classes, to offer concepts, ideas, to memorize things, and education is evolving, of course, and I think that art can be used as a universal language to engage people with fundamental values, fundamental principles of bioethics, of global bioethics. In the approach we try to do in the light of human rights we claim are universal. It is not important if you are black or white, Indian or Spanish as I am, or if you are from China, from the United States, or from Bolivia. Human rights and duties, it's something that is calling to our attention at universal level. But look that sometimes in communicating values, we have problems of language because of the different language. I don't know how to speak fluently I would say in Spanish. No, in Spanish I know very well, but I don't know how to speak in Chinese, or I don't know to talk in the different dialects of our beautiful country, India, that unfortunately I cannot visit this time, and I apologize for not being with you in person. But there's a lot of languages and dialects only in your country, India. And this is the thing in a lot of parts of the world. So if we choose a tool that can be universal, as art is, and when we are talking about art, we are talking about painting, music, theater, short videos, sculptures, poetry, literature. Art can be used as a universal language. And that's why I think it's imperative how we can be creative, producing new pedagogical strategies that can be designed, stimulating critical thinking and ethical reflection in a globalized and multicultural world. This doesn't mean that we have to abandon concepts, ideas, principles. Of course not. But I think that we have to do both. On the one hand, how from our brain and our neurons and our mind, we can touch our brain, mind, and soul. And from the brain, we integrate this in our heart, in our emotions. But in bioaesthetics, we want to offer a complementary way that comes from the emotions. And then in the whole person, in the unity of person, these aesthetic experiences can move, I would say, up to our mind. And in this combination of back and forth, emotion, rational and emotions, emotion and rational, we can, in this contemporary society, to design and to help education in the different fields. So look at this is why we claim that educating through beauty is a path that we should explore. Because educating in values through the aesthetic experience can stimulates intellectual curiosity and also creativity from our young and also adult people. And that means that the exposure in what is the aesthetic experience, that means the paused, calm contemplation of artworks can help artists, spectators, and learners. So in some way, artworks have an echo that I call ethical echoes that are present in different expressions of art. And in that sense, I think art can offer an innovative and teaching opportunities and to help us to emphasize and to appreciate the aesthetic dimension of human behavior. This is something that I have been learning, especially in two different experiences. The first one was living in Italy for 17 years. Italians are genial, very creative, it's history of art, and they can express this in a beautiful way. On the other hand, I was also making an experience as visiting professor at MD Anderson Cancer Center, the University of Texas in Houston, and I see in a very huge hospital that was plenty of paintings, fountains, music, and so I understand, this is not by chance. That means that art can help also have a therapeutic effect. And working about this, I also understand also from the Italian language, because I remember an experience moving around this downtown in Rome. It was an old lady, a handicapped lady, trying to cross the street of Rome. Rome is a crazy city in terms of traffic, probably Paul knows better than me. And then at a certain point, the lady was trying to pass through the traffic light, and it was plenty of cars, and a young and adolescent girl approached the lady to help her to cross the street. And it was a group of ladies around the traffic light that's taking a look to that gesture. They claimed, "Ma che bello, ma che bello." So what a beautiful thing. So that means that this good behavior, the reality, the truth of a needed old lady and handicapped lady was appreciated with this sensitivity of the beauty. And Italians using their language, the category of beauty, also for ethics. That, in other words, another way to say that human behavior has also an aesthetic dimension. And in that sense, arts have the ability to influence human behavior and also awaken ethical awareness. In other words, it's a tool to convey universal moral values, to convey and to promote universal principles, what global bioethics is trying to do around the world. Is this a holistic and effective approach to the training process in schools and universities have the potential to become also not only a contemplation of art, but how this bioaesthetics, this aesthetic experience have an effect or a transformative effect within education, promoting comprehensive development of both academic and ethical dimensions. Because in academics, we try to foster not only knowledge, not only competency or skills, but how we can make grow and flourish in this process that the butterfly colorful can show the transformation of the existence of people. In conclusion, I think that in contemporary digital and emotional cultural context, educating through beauty is a path we should explore. And I think this is an imperative for educators. How we can make the aesthetic experience present in our classrooms to transform perception of our students, attitudes, decisions, convictions, and actions, but not only the students, also for us professors, also for the people when we are in contact with the society and to have an impact in the culture, focusing in this aesthetic experience that needed to be accompanied by people trained also in bioaesthetics. And by doing that, to make flourish people and communities by the transforming power of art in human behavior, stimulating ethics and virtue in teachers and disciples. And in that way, teaching aesthetic experiences would stimulate virtue and respect for human dignity and human rights. human dignity and human rights, and human duties. Because in the Western culture, we are focused more on rights, and we have learned from the Asian cultures, from the East, from the South of the planet, the importance of the communities. How we can promote this is a challenge, it's an imperative, and I think that can be a path that is on the one hand based on the truth of humans in the world, that we can contribute to humanity for the good through the beauty. And that's what I want to offer with you, and I thank you for your attention, and thank you for participating in this important conference. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Professor García. It was a pleasure to hear you, and we are very sad that you cannot share with us here in Bangalore. I would like, because I don't know, as now the communication is fluent and we have a good communication. I will try to make at least one question, because we have decided to make question at the end, but as you have here now, and I would like to take advantage of this just to ask you if you know some experience for the education in moral values and virtues for medical students following this proposal of yours. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Some years ago, I found some group of art and ethics at the University of Edinburgh, and they focused more, I would say, on the beauty of science, of how cells, how the human body, presenting the beauty of the body. But in terms of education as such, I think this is something quite innovative what we are trying to do in our UNESCO chair. We are really exploring the field. In the last years, we have published 4 books on bioaesthetics. The first one was Bioaesthetics, about its foundations, the first one. The second was Bioethics and Human Health. The third was Bioethics in time of COVID-19. And the last one was on bioaesthetics and global bioethics. That is something that I bring to your attention. If you move and write bioaesthetics in internet, you find that most of the entries move to surgery, cosmetic surgery, societies or companies. There is no people working on bioaesthetics. That is a new term we have been coining. And in terms of educations, of course, there's a lot of conferences, for example, the International Association of Bioethics, that they use to put a track dealing with ethics, and art, bioaesthetics or bioethics and art. But what I think that is really innovative for us, and this is what we try to go deeper and deeper, it's about what I mentioned about the human or the aesthetic dimension of human behavior, how we can analyze what is good and what is bad, what is best and what is worse. Because in ethics, everything is not white and black. There is also a gray area. How we can express this through the universal language of art in the classes, it's something really innovative. We recently had an interesting course at the University of Houston in Rome, in which we were dealing, for example, with the art and literature. We take an important quotation from Dostoevsky, "What beauty will save the world?" And moving around the text and the literature of the different actors of this novel, very famous novel. So we try to approach the ethics about the good behavior, and the artwork is called The Idiot, Absence of the Idiot. And this actor was presenting what is an ideal of a good behavior that moves from all the things you have been dealing in this conference: compassion, care, and love. And love. At the very end is love, friendship that can help ethics, that can help also polarization that is present in ethics and bioethics. So I'm not sure if I answered thoroughly your question, Pablo, but this is what I can tell you.
Thank you very much. I hope we will have occasion to continue to talk about this fascinating topic. So we are moving forward, but if you can continue there, we can share other thoughts. So now I will ask Dr. Olinda Timms. I don't need to present her because you all know very well. She's an anesthesiologist. He has worked for many years here. She serves as advisor of the biomedical ethics of ICEE, Center for Health, Ecologists and Technology. She is the chairperson of the Institution Ethics Committee of St. Martha Hospital. She is talking, the title of her presentation is Role of Virtue Ethics in Teaching Ethics. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Pablo. It has been very interesting to me that right through this conference so far, from the very first inaugural function where we had the chief guest speak about virtue ethics, this theme of virtue ethics has been continuing right up to the last plenary that we've had, and speakers have continuously referred to this form of virtue ethics as something that we have to return to, and this is really endorsing my message on this sharing today. I feel more than ever it is time for us as...
We cannot see your glorious face.
Okay. It's the yes, I'll do this. Yeah. I think it is time for us as educators in ethics to think about how we can emphasize virtue ethics in addition to other moral theories of ethics once more, and find a way in which we can center this to ensure that our decision making and our role modeling in teaching of ethics is more sound and durable, and ethics is not just taught as a subject anymore. So what does virtue ethics teach? It has been the dominant theory since Plato and up until the Enlightenment in the 1500s. This was the dominant model theory that was there in philosophy, and it continued in Western philosophy even after that time. But there was a return to it in the mid-20th century with the Anscombe modern model philosophy papers. And they were written at a time when there was a discontent with the other two model theories, major model theories, that is deontology and utilitarianism. And it was felt that these two other theories were not sufficiently addressing issues like virtue, character, the motive of actions, the relationships, the culture, the moral education, and the concept of well-being and happiness. So there was a sense in which it was in the way that ethics was discussed was incomplete without more emphasis on virtue ethics. And this was in fact done then when Kant introduced the doctrine of virtue, and there was the consequentialist virtue ethics, which also came into prominence at that time. And now in latter years, we have seen philosophers, teachers like Edmund Pellegrino and Alistair MacIntyre again bringing back this emphasis and focus on virtue ethics as an important component if we are to teach ethics in a fashion that will stay and change and transform students. So to summarize very quickly, and I know all in this room probably know all this, so I will just summarize very quickly. Aristotelian ethics or virtue ethics speaks of the need to develop character and virtues. Now, character traits, not habits, that are typically in response to existential and ontological questions and not typically related to just the problem at hand. So the questions that they address are: who are we? Why are we here? Is there a higher purpose to our being here? What are my goals? How do I achieve these goals? How do I reach my goals? And what does it mean to be human? And how does that differ from being humane? So Aristotle was a student of Plato, and he described largely the three central aspects of this theory. One was the development of virtues, which he felt was central to the development of every human being. It was necessary that students and young people are motivated to develop these virtues, and not virtues that are specific to any profession or a stage in life, but virtues for life. He felt, he spoke of phronesis or practical wisdom, which we also call prudence sometimes, but it's the wisdom that enables us to make decisions which are not just calculated through logic or by observing codes and rules, but by understanding the person in their situation with the wisdom that comes from experience. And this, he felt, would lead to human flourishing, or what he called eudaimonia, which is achieving a balance in virtues, not extremes of virtue, of being, but a sense of well-being from building the virtue to a point that it can be practically used and integrated into one's character in a settled way. So the virtues that they typically are spoken of are compassion, loyalty, honesty, integrity, patience, respectfulness, and so on. And the idea is not necessarily to be virtuous, which is a different meaning altogether, but to be a person who is in pursuit of values and who has a character which has a settled disposition which of good values. So today, why then is virtue ethics, if it is so important to the development of our children, of our students, of indeed ourselves, of each and every person who needs to ask these ontological questions about being and how we are, so that we determine how we live and how we work and act? Why is it less emphasized? For one, it tends to focus on the actor, the person, and not the action. And in our teaching of ethics, and especially with medical ethics, we look at the situation, we look at what is the objective, what do we intend to do, utilitarian logic is applied, or we look at what is the code of ethics, what does it say, what are the rules, and we do not really query the actor, the person, and what the role of the person is in that situation. So that has not been the emphasis so far. Virtue ethics depends again on role models and exemplars. And these have been difficult to find of late. Historically, we have heard of people who've been excellent role models in their profession, and they have been talked about, spoken of, and we have such role models in medicine and other professions. But we need to have these role models around us, not just historic or one-off, but all around us. People who are developing virtues and who are struggling to do it, and even observe their struggle, observe their journey. The another reason is it's much less easy to teach to that extent. When it is observed, when virtue ethics is reflected on in the individual and then observed in the teacher, it is less easy to teach. It is more caught, it is more understood, it is from heart to heart, or it is from experience to experience that one picks up the virtues that are important for their lives. So in this respect, it is more personal, and as compared to deontology, which could be a set of rules, and emphasis on logic and utilitarianism, this is different and difficult, probably less easy to teach. Now, these virtues that I spoke of, like compassion and respect and so on, they tend to be foundational or thought of as foundational. So when there is a context or a specific case or a decision to be made, having these foundational character traits does not seem to add value to decision making. It doesn't seem to, but I would argue that it does, because it leads us to the right choice through phronesis and through a deliberative understanding of why the rules matter and why a utilitarian aspect of it has to be taken into consideration as well. Those who do not emphasize virtue ethics also say that they do not address specific dilemmas in medicine, very complex, technologically driven dilemmas. And so they are hard for teachers to teach in a way that will be useful to students. And others say that there is a cultural relativism in the way that we develop our virtues, depending on our communities, our religion, the way we are raised. Our emphasis on virtues might be slightly different, and so in a teaching environment then this becomes a little more complicated. In addition, there is a potential sometimes for a conflict of virtues. Should I be completely honest with the patient, or should I be compassionate and delay the breaking of bad news at this moment? So there is sometimes a potential for conflict of virtues. And again, it places the burden, as I said in the beginning, right on the individual. So virtue ethics in education is important, and I would argue that it is important for these reasons. It is that we have to see ourselves as moral actors in life, not just in our profession. We are citizens, we are individuals, we are members of a family, members of a community. We are not acting alone and isolated in our decision making. These values that we inculcate will not only be of importance in our work, but they will also be important for us to develop, to attain our goals, to understand our role in life and society better, and to be exemplars to others, which is an important part of our role in any profession. Virtue ethics allows for an inherent understanding of why. The understanding of why we have to do the right thing. Not just the knowledge of the right thing to do in a situation, but why we need to do it in the context of who we are, who we serve, why we serve, and why we do the things that we do. And it is important in virtue ethics to emphasize the freedom of choice in this decision to do the right thing, in this moral decision making, not be slaves to codes and laws and rules, not be afraid and do the right thing out of fear of breaking the rules, not to be slaves to logic, the logic that is required for a utilitarian decision, but to be free to take another path that might be more effective as a solution for the patient or the person that requires the decision. It will be beneficial not only to the patient but to the patient in his setting with his community and for that time and place. So this releases this freedom to make a decision from the point of view of virtue ethics, frees us up to act as we would with our practical wisdom and prudence, understanding that our role in a holistic manner. It achieves for us and for those who we are dealing with. It achieves for us our life goals and achieves for us a level of happiness. It is important that as we develop our conscience in acquiring virtues, we develop our conscience, and in that, when our conscience is served, we feel a sense of well-being and happiness. And in developing these virtue ethics, we become role models for our students who seek to do the right action. And they can see that while it is difficult to acquire virtues, they can see that there is value in the struggle to do it. And that inspires them to themselves try to improve their character or develop virtues. This kind of action and experience speaks louder than words. And it is needed today more than ever to overcome the negative influences in our society, which pose the danger of normalizing what is wrong. And our students are very quick to pick up the easier way, which is always, so attractive, and the quick way. But sometimes the way to the right action needs patience, needs perseverance, and can be quite difficult, painful even. But that may be the way to go. And without that, without having these role models who are speaking of virtues, speaking of the value of virtue ethics, it is difficult, it's going to be difficult for our students and youngsters to overcome these negative influences in society. And then finally, I just want to speak about, 1 minute. My final slide is about why in general it is important to build moral agency. One is that if we have this conversation continuously, like we're having it in this conference, and I hope it just continues in the days ahead, the talk about good values, virtues, and the importance of developing ourselves to be the best version for ourselves and for others, to develop to our full potential, to achieve our goals. This is something that can impact our society positively. We should be recognizing virtue in others and rewarding it. We have to help our students to move from just compliance of rules to making decisions with convictions and living with it. And this is not an easy task, but we have to make this transition from compliance to conviction. If we develop in our students this conversation of who we are, who is a good doctor, what is my role, and develop in them a vision for a just and compassionate world, it will make this task to develop character and virtues, it will make this task a little easier. And for us in our institutions, we can do a lot. We can enshrine virtues and values. We can enshrine values in our institution policy and vision so that it's available all the time to our students and our faculty in our institutions, constantly reminding them to the standards that we are setting for ourselves. We should be recognizing the role models among us. When we invite people for functions and in the institution, we should be calling in people who are virtuous, who are role models, and they are not just political leaders and people who are financially well off, but the people who are doing for society what society requires. Those people should be invited for our as chief guests for our programs. And when awards are given, we should reward virtue and find a way to do it in our faculty and our students. And this way we can build transforming environments that shift the emphasis from just rules and fulfilling of duties to an environment that is vibrant and alive, caring, compassionate, and just. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Timms, for present an overview of the virtue ethics and the possibilities in education, and just to help young people to understand the beauty of the good life. I'm sure that in the colloquium after the presentation we will have possibility to go deeper in some of the aspects you have presented. And now we move on, and I pass the micro to my co-chair, Professor Telma dos Santos. She is professor at the College of Health Science graduate program in Bioethics in the University of Brasília.
Hi. Our third speaker is Dr. Marta Wilcoxson. She has a career in financial management and industry compliance and ongoing academic research in business ethics education. And she also has been dedicated to the concept of delivering industry-specific culture and ethics training to current and aspiring financial professionals.
First of all, I want to thank everybody who's willing to listen to me for a second time. You've gone above and beyond, so thank you very much. For this session, I'd like to invite you to go on a journey with me in my conundrum and how I, as a business ethics educator, develop a curriculum that enhances ethical decision-making processes of my students. Before I begin, I want to tell you a little bit about myself because this will put it into context. As explained, I come from the financial industry, and that industry is particularly ethically challenged. Since the year 2000, I've arbitrated for FINRA, and that's the regulatory arm of the Securities and Exchange Commission. And during that time, I became very interested in why I saw some very good people make some very bad decisions. Well, this gave me the inspiration to go back and complete a master's in negotiated dispute resolution from Creighton School of Law. And then I knew that if I was going to improve my industry, I needed to reach that population that was going to be going out into the financial industry, into financial professions. So I wanted to get back into education. So I went back and completed my ed doctorate at Creighton Graduate School. So now I'm a professor of business, and I wish I could go back and tell my high school teachers that I'm actually teaching ethics, because they wouldn't believe it. But quickly, what I'm going to go through this last session is I knew that I wanted to develop an interdisciplinary approach to building a good ethics curriculum. But challenges in building a curriculum involve how do you build it, what needs to be included, and metrics, how do you measure it. So I went back, and I'm going to invite you on a journey with me. It's a quick journey to go through something called human-centered design process. Now, I know most of you have gone through a type of planning that is human-centered design, but this is how I've done it. The goal for me was to build an effective curriculum for Western business schools, think in the United States. So I mentioned human-centered design. It's pretty basic, and it's probably what you do in planning. But in my case, it was used to ensure that the experiences that the students go through are tailored to the needs not only of the students, but stakeholders. And when you think stakeholders, it's not just students, it's not just industry, but it's students. Stakeholders are also my institution. It's my community. And we've got to think globally, so stakeholders globally. So what did I do? The very first process in human-centered design is to build a brainstorming group, or a group that will help me go through this process. Now, I mentioned stakeholders. In the brainstorming group, I had 2 prior MBA students. I had 2 faculty colleagues, but they were from outside disciplines. One was from education, and the other was from public administration. Then I had somebody from the school administration, and finally I had 2 people from local industry. And I had to get them to commit to meet with me at least 5 times. And so food and alcohol were included, and that got them to commit. So that if you ever need to have a group meet, always have food. So the process, it's very simple. We met 5 times. First, we looked at my research. Why is interdisciplinary approach to business ethics education, why is it needed? And then the second meeting, I bared my soul. I shared my syllabus, my current syllabus with them, and the group was very candid in their reflection. Then the third meeting, and this is when it gets exciting. I asked for potential options. What were their ideas? How would it wow? Or what are potential options? And then from the potential options, the next meeting, we distilled it down on what would make a new curriculum in business ethics education wow, or be more functional. So finally, and this was up to me, I had to implement and figure out a way to monitor. Well, when we looked at the why, and this is what I presented, and it's something that I talked about earlier, business problems are interdisciplinary by nature. You can't isolate business ethics education. The second thing that I shared was that ethical complexities require looking at the problem through multiple lenses, not just a financial lens, not just a social lens, but also philosophical, legal, and other lenses, other disciplinary lenses. I knew that we needed to promote critical thinking, and we've talked a lot about that this past week, and adaptability. And then finally, it needed to be a curriculum that supported ethical decision-making skills and actually training or imparting information to the student. How do you make an ethical decision? And then finally, we've got to align with not only future employers, but with society in general. My obligation was to prepare graduate students to be ethical, to go out on their professional journey and be ethical. So, what is? Well, this is where I shared my current curriculum, my current syllabus with the group, and it was bearing my soul. What the feedback I got was, first and foremost, there was focus on compliance over moral imagination, too much focus on law and regulation. The second thing is it was a Western approach to business ethics education. The third, there was an overemphasis on individualism, and this is key to Western business ethics education. And along with that, the syllabus, what I was using and the texts I were using, really challenged Western assumptions in ethical practices in business. And then I had to get my head around this, but the last was there was a huge disconnect between ethical theories and practice. So it was a theory-practice gap. So I was teaching theories, but not concentrating enough on practice. So that was that session. Then we moved on to what was really interesting, and this is where I got excited. By and large, the group felt that there had to be experiential learning, and case studies really provide opportunities if the cases that are studied are pertinent. The other what might be was that we needed to incorporate non-Western ethical perspectives. And so Asian cultures, Central Africa, different religious, Buddhism, Shintoism, even North American indigenous Indian ethical practices needed to be not taught, but exposed. And then second to the last is there has to be a focus on moral decision-making skills. Yes? 3? Oh, I've got 3 minutes left. I'll hurry. Okay. Focus on moral decision-making skills and then encourage moral imagination. So the answer, experiential learning through case studies. So I need to include global ethical theories. I need to include global economic and cultural structures and make sure that my students appreciate that. I need to use cross-disciplinary practices, and I need to rely on outside faculty. And then finally, environmental and social responsibility needs to be threaded in any type of business ethics concern. So on that, did I do it? Thank you so much. I really appreciate being included in this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marta. Well, our last speaker is Dr. Manjulika Vaz. She's a well-known of us. Dr. Manjulika Vaz, she's a professor at the Health and Humanities, St. John's Research Institute, here at the Medical College.
I think you've been seeing too much of me. And I'll try and be quick. I think we've all reached a level of fatigue. I like the fact that we have built on learning over the last few days, and even in today's session, I think I am moving towards praxis from theory. I feel daunted by theory now because I feel my inadequacy. I feel the road ahead in terms of learning is so huge. The story really that I'm going to tell you is to share our experiences of using humanities as a means towards this larger education of ethics as a way of life. And really that's what I'm going to be sharing with you. And my co-author is, I think, in another session doing another parallel track presentation. Just wanting to give you a flavor of why the humanities with bioethics is novel within India. A feedback that I've got from friends and colleagues in Europe, in the US, it's understood that the humanities and bioethics go together in terms of the content as well as in terms of pedagogy. This is a bit of history. All of you know, you've been talking about the multiple streams of medicine in India, Ayurveda, the other streams of Unani and yoga. So we've had all these various streams. Also the kind of learning has been very unstructured. We also used to have different methods. We used to have the licentiate, which was for 2 years. So really, as our colonial powers were ruling us, we wanted to emulate the West. So we began with this Indian Medical Act of 1916, and then it went on with the Medical Council of India. NMC was called MCI before. So from 1916 to 1933, what you see is an attempt to standardize, to unify, to become uniform in terms of standards, in terms of competencies, and it moved away all the variation, the diversity of Indian medical systems. So finally, what this meant was, the commercial goals that were achieved. An increase in the undergraduate medical college admissions finally, as we are moving towards this formalization, structured way of teaching medicine, and the way colleges are set up, and therefore we have education as an industry. So for me, this is the backdrop in which we need to understand why we are looking at a different way, or why there is this opposition as well of having something as liberal and broad as the humanities as a means of teaching bioethics. Again, just to tell you from our perspective how we look at medical education and the humanities, is that the human condition, again, I don't have to tell you this because you'll have been part of this journey of a wider understanding of bioethics, is more than a medical one. In India, it is seen, as Dr. Tenharvey presented in the morning, that first category of medical ethics. And so it is an exclusive club, an exclusive territory. You seek objectivity, it is deductive, and the notion of falsifiability is central to medicine. But what this does is it fails to recognize plurality, the gaze, the voice of the other. And to me, it was interesting when we've been talking about Illich and Foucault to be reminded that our understanding of life and disease is not linked with biology, but with that wider context of economics, of politics, of geography, of language itself. So while medical knowledge obeys regularity, that's where our knowledge systems are in the classification of diseases into categories. Foucault reminds us to add to savoir, to knowledge, regard. And regard is nothing but gaze, about how we see the world, the matter of perception. A lot of us have revere Edmund Pellegrino, who, being a doctor, spoke about the inadequacies of medical education. That last quote of his I'll read out because it's not very visible, that medicine cannot examine itself critically without its own intellectual tools. Humanities and the arts sets a man free from enslavement to the opinions of others, to derive opinions of our own. So this whole focus of critical thinking, of introspection, and this really summarizes, to an extent, the contrasting approaches between medicine and the humanities. From biomedical to a biopsychosocial, socio-ecological and historical approach, to a more qualitative understanding, not being reductionist, but being inductive and subjective, not looking at falsifiability, but looking at plurality. And while the intent of medical education is evidence-based, trying to look at the human-centered approach and being person-centered, and therefore allowing for space and plurality. In terms of competence, from technical competence to add on the emotional competence. And this really is a model that we use, the Cartesian dualism, where it's not just the body, but I would say the being, not just the mind, but being. And our medical education, as is focused here, to understand the basis of disease, to look at examination and investigation, to arrive at a good diagnosis, because you want the patient to get improved. But on the other side, to be able to, I think we spoke about judgment, just not diagnosis. To be able to feel, to understand, to interpret, so that you can act and react to that specific person, not just the symptom or the case. And therefore have skills of communication, of reflection, of empathy, and enhance this relationship you have with the person who needs to be treated, and therefore have a better clinical outcome. I always have this issue with doctors who say, I have this issue with non-compliance. And it is the patient who is accused of not understanding, of not being able to follow instructions, not being able to even care about themselves. And really, if you just change the gaze, change the lens in which you look at that phenomenon, you'll realize the understanding actually has to shift to the doctor being able to understand why that patient has not been able to adhere. I think we have spoken about this from Alberto to all of us about the use of the liberal arts, of the humanities, whether it's literature, whether it is history, to get us to understand imagination, to get us to understand the human behavior. I'm going to move quite fast only because we do not have time. So these are the kind of methods that we use: reflective narratives, storytelling, book reading, being able to take a moment and pause to step back and look at your own encounters with a patient, to process your own dilemmas. So these are sessions that we have with medical faculty and with medical students. And what has come out of these sessions is like a new mirror that has thrown light upon that phenomenon of that encounter, or that situation in which they hadn't looked at themselves from a different angle. Another example that I'm sharing with you is something you may have passed by from Annex 3 or from Popol Auditorium here. If you haven't, maybe we can walk down here together. I would like even to take Walter Fontanini. This is a different way of immortality, where students who are working with cadavers, working with bodies that have been donated for their education, to use those opportunities for them to reflect on why that person actually made that noble deed of donating their bodies. Because now we don't have unclaimed bodies, we have all bodies that have been donated. What would their family have been going through? What would give them closure in terms of grieving? So these are topics that we discuss using that moment of the cadaver as being the first teacher. And this is something that students came up with in terms of a design and its meaning. So this is placed in a garden that's called the Eternal Grove. And those two bodies actually symbolize eternity, the symbol of eternity. And there is an angle at which they are placed, showing that one is helping the other. A message that came out from the study that we did with body donors, with their next of kin, as well as scholars from different religions, because death and religion go very closely, is that the donors don't want their names to be put up. They said, in death we are all equal. We have given ourselves for the greater good. We would like the doctors to give back to society in that same way. And that was something so remarkable for the students, because it took them away from just looking at muscle, nerve, and structure of the human body to this larger purpose of the good doctor. We spoke about art. On one side we spoke about beauty, but here in this class situation, where this is the famous celebratory event of Lenac coming out with the stethoscope, and we asked the students, what does this painting reflect? What is the purpose that the artist is trying to convey in this picture? So while you say celebratory, if you can see, are these colors celebratory? They're actually quite dull and they are quite, dismal. But if you come to our History of Medicine Museum, you'll see another painting of Thom. We have his whole collection, second edition, quite priceless, where the colors are bright. The kind of people there are well dressed, and there's like happiness in the air. But in this situation, we take the student further. And we talk about the arrangement of people. We actually see that the physician is not using that stethoscope, which was meant to actually give distance so that you are not going in that proximity of the patient. And that's something that comes out. We also ask them, what do they think? And it's interesting that not many, but some do, talk about the distance the other students are keeping behind the chair, maybe towards the window. And then there's a discussion. Doctors need to care for themselves. That was what one argument was. The other argument was that patient definitely looks like the patient is dying, definitely consumption, that is TB that's consuming him. so it's better to be safe. The other context that comes through is about the moral and legal issue, ethical issues. And as you can see, a painting comes through with multiple angles. If you look at those sunken eyes, it's actually like the person is already dead, and the way the distance is maybe the concept of the social death, the concept of stigma of a contagious disease. We also take colors to question the times. And actually, at this point of time, it was the Industrial Revolution, when there was a huge fog around, so the air was not clear and clean. And also, people, the poorest of the poor, were the people who were dying, who were getting various diseases, pulmonary diseases. So, okay, what I'm getting at is that a visual painting, an installation, we use films or narratives, or like stimulating talk, or like a dance, we've used dance and theater, are the triggers. So this is looking at the pedagogy of change, of ethical reasoning. And the questions that you saw were not just questions, but they were with the learning objective in mind. So they were focused and directed towards inductive reasoning, towards critical reflection and thinking, which we find so common in the humanities, but not so true in medical sciences. Medical sciences go by facts, by this many facts are the causes of this condition. So understanding at the individual level, as at the first stage, which is something which I find extremely difficult among current students. The herd mentality is so much easier than to put yourself out there with an individual thought, and that's because of the whole history of our education. It's the alternative schools that allow you to reflect, question, think, and be an individual. But for us at medical school level, it is a huge breaking of ground that has to be done. So then to come to the collective, to be able to understand that diversity and plurality is all right, and that's how the real world is. That's how the context of families, of communities, of individuals are. And then, like we've been talking here, as we come with various disciplines, there's nuance and there's depth, and that's where the facilitator needs to continue the dialogue till you reach a sense of saturation or completedness. Okay. And then we go to the various levels of learning, which is from cognitive to emotional to the ethical. And remembering to connect the three. I think from even the earliest talks we have looked at the mind, the feeling, and behavior. Because ultimately what we want to change is behavior. And we very often can get stuck at one of those three stages. And then, of course, to move towards action. I think I have run out of time, so I'm not going to go in more, but we've covered these in earlier topics about gaze, about harm, plurality, and social determinants of health, and at a methodological angle. Okay, so yes, I also believe that with all that we've spoken about, I deal with AI in health, I deal with climate change. These are all of the things about aging and digital immortality and all of this. We need new tools. What medicine and science gives us seems inadequate, and therefore I do believe humanities has potential. My plea is whether we can create a humanities cell in every medical college. But these are all challenges. Yeah, and that's my last slide. So that is time. Faculty always tell us there's too much that's on the plate for medical students. we can't include you. And then what happens is that whether it is a film screening or whether it is a poetry discussion, it all becomes extracurricular. This is like, the fun time, the break time, they're bunking classes, so it's not core, it is outside. So my focus in my presentation today was to tell you that to apply, whether you call it virtue ethics or way of life ethics, this is critical, that we bring in a methodology front and center. We are also struggling with that, assessment and evaluation. Can you use the existing methods of evaluation? How objective are narratives or life sharing as a method of evaluation? Who do we have trained as faculty, whether it's internal or external, who can be mentors or who can be facilitators? We are not looking at teachers, we are looking at really the moderator of a learning journey. And this is the other argument, that in a very defensive way, this is beyond our scope. Let somebody else handle it. Or like we heard, okay, it's also happening with lawyers, it's also happening with business people. So maybe in another phase of their life, they can have an ethics course or degree. Okay, with that, thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to take you to see these various things in person in our Health and Humanities and History of Medicine department. Thank you.
May I ask the other two speakers to come here to the podium just for the discussion. I have a lot of questions, but I prefer just to ask the people in the audience. Please, do we have a microphone
for a very interesting session? We have discussed a lot about how to teach and what to teach, but I'm also interested in the question, who is teaching? Because the question is there a relation between teaching ethics and the ethics teacher, him or herself? Because in traditional medical ethics, there was this, what they call medical etiquette, that there are all kinds of rules for doctors who are teaching medicine. They should be modest, they should be decent, they should be polite, all those rules for the teacher. Now, in ethics, I was always taught that the ethicist philosopher Max Scheler, he was teaching ethics, and his idea was, I'm teaching ethics as a road sign. It points out where you need to go. But I myself do not have to go on that road. I only signal, but you cannot request me to do the same. And I think that's a little bit maybe contradictory, and especially if you have virtue ethics, can you expect that a teacher himself or herself should show virtues? But if that is the case, then what kind of requirements do we have for the people who are teaching ethics?
I think Dr. Olinda also touched upon it, because when we did a study on the hidden curriculum, this is something which came out, that if you have a discordance with what is taught and what is practiced, what actually happens is the student dismisses what is taught and they catch what they see as behavior. And very often, following the previous session, that is seen as successful practice. The person who is not practicing the ideal, what is taught, but following this other method. So having said that, what came to my mind as well is that while the faculty person or the teacher embodies these virtues, I also believe there is that level necessarily of introspection and humility of being on that journey, not already have arrived there. That there is the real world struggle to reach those ideals. And that there is a two-way learning process also, because that's the other element of medical college, that there is a big power difference in knowledge between the student and the teacher, and therefore they cannot be two-way learning. So those are the two things I would say to respond to your question.
Thank you. I think in medicine particularly, and in India, there has been a long history of this requirement of the teacher, the medical teacher. From our older books of medicine, the Charaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita, the role of the teacher is very much explained and described in detail. And the importance of the teacher embodying these values so that the students understand what is expected of them. In medicine, doctors teach doctors, and it's always that way. So while they teach, they impart knowledge and they teach skills, they will also transmit the right attitude and ethics. It is only in that continuum that you can expect, say, medical students, for example, to understand that ethics goes side by side with the skilling and the knowledge. It is not something separate. I was, in fact, quite surprised when I went to the Center for Ethics in Oxford, and I accompanied them in their ethics classes, and those ethics classes for the medical students there, were taken by philosophers. Only philosophers took those medical ethics classes. And I asked about it. And I said, but they would question you because you've not had the lived experience. And they said, well, yes, they do sometimes. And that's why it's important for us to really get into the experience, the medical experience, before we can teach, get into the cases, get into the nuances. But it's not easy for a philosopher to get into the nuances of the doctor-patient relationship so I was a little confused. Maybe it is perhaps because it's ethics that philosophers were taking it, but to my mind I felt that was less than perfect. I felt it would be very important for doctors who have actually had those experiences, those difficulties in decision making, the troubles that they've struggled with in order to get where they're going with being ethical. That is the lesson that the medical student will take away. I'm speaking just from my profession, but I think it would apply to other professions as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll give a quick example from the business field. We have a problem with, your question was so good. It's not only what is taught, but who teaches it. And there's a new focus on teaching global ethics. And we've got a problem with ethics teachers that have not traveled, they've not studied, they've not done business globally, and don't have the compassion or the insight for global structures and global issues.
Using different educational techniques that mean not only concepts, not only art, but also cases that can help the critical delivery of the different decisions in different contexts. And that requires a specific training. There's a lot of programs having the capacity to make competent people to be trained specifically in bioethics. From doctors that can specialize in bioethics, or lawyers specialized in bioethics and biolaw, but then having also a capacity to be not only a good theorist, but of course the challenge is also to be virtuous. Because as has been mentioned already, it's not enough to offer knowledge, but the students and disciples should follow examples. And in that sense, a master, a professor teaching bioethics should be someone that can irradiate and inspire by their life, by their how he is close to the students, and how he creates an academic community where this interaction between people, between collectivities. And this is a challenge, especially in the digital era, thinking that most of these things can be done online. I can get a master, I can get a program, I can get a diploma using online, only online. And I think this is important to have availability of the online resources. But on the other hand, I think it's essential to contact with professors, good medical doctors having the capacity to communicate and to know also about educational techniques to transmit with conviction, with passion, and how you can show what is good, what is the truth, what is beauty in ethics, using these also educational pedagogical tools. And the truth, if I can respond to Professor Benhabe, that I suggest also to read his last book on color in bioethics. This is something that he mentioned this some months ago he was working on, also in relation with our project with bioethics in global art, and he was so interested in this. It's some aesthetics is something that he has not dealt today, and that it would be also nice to ask Professor Benhabe to give us some insights about his last book of color in bioethics.
Thank you. So, any other questions? Well, if not, I can continue in this area, because my experience, I don't know what is yours, and I want to hear from you, is that many times the professor who influences you more is not the bioethics professor, but the professor you find in the hospital when you go for some experience in the guards, in oncology or in cardiology, when you see how this doctor deals with the patient, how they treat them, and then many people understand what is the ethics there. I don't know if you have some comments on this, because I was thinking was the Olinda talk about how can we learn virtues, and we need a community, because otherwise virtue is not just for the individual. So how can we create this virtue community?
Thank you for that question. This is important because we must understand that in India we do not have many doctors who are trained in bioethics or medical ethics. The numbers are appallingly low. And it's not only because we don't have certifying programs, it's also because it is not seen as a necessity or looked at as something very important. Only now it is gaining importance over the last 1 or 2 years. But it does not seem to be something that will add value to you. The faculty feels that if I take this training in ethics, I will have to do my surgery and also teach ethics. It's looked at like that. So there is no value seen in it, and monetary compensation will not be there. So it is seen more as something that is taken up as social contribution, something extra that is being done now, but I hope that will change. I also feel that this idea that Professor Pablo is saying, that we have to create communities, is already happening in many colleges. In the college that I studied in, we did not have ethics classes, but we had a lot of connection with our faculty. They lived on campus. We would talk to them after the class. We would go and have a cup of coffee with them. We listened to their stories. We heard about their vision. We shared our difficulties. They shared from their struggles. And in that, we developed a vision of what medicine should be like for this country, who are the people we should be serving, who is a good doctor, and how do we get to that point? How do we overcome the difficulties to go there? And I realize now, only after I started my clinical practice, and many years, in fact decades into my clinical practice, I realized the formation I had in ethics, though it was not given a name and a title. It was because of the exemplars in our faculty who constantly interacted with students and shared, for example, by their example. Staying up, going to the wards as an intern and seeing a senior professor sitting by the bedside of a patient and just, watching that patient and then finding out that he didn't need to be there. There were many doctors below him who could have been there, but he was worried post-op about this patient, and he had come to see this patient after his dinner, and before he went to bed, so that he wanted to see if he could do something. That was beyond the call of duty. So understanding what goes beyond the call of duty, what is the larger perspective, who are the people that we should care for, developing a corpus of funds so that patients who could not afford could also get the treatment in our hospital. And working with that even as students, having programs and functions so that we could collect money for these students, for these patients who might not be able to pay their bills. So this is the transformative environment that I was talking about, and I've experienced it, so I know that it works. And I believe that if this is institutionalized and then there is orientation at the level of institutions to every faculty and member who is there, that this is a vision for a healthy world. This is who we are and this is what we do. And whether it is driven by religious beliefs, your faith, whether it is driven by personalities and their vision, it can be transforming institutions. This can happen. It does happen. And I think this is one way forward.
I just want to add, maybe it sounds contrary, but also it answers Tenhave's question again, is that I do believe that the team teaching needs to be interdisciplinary. So very often the cardiologist or the gynecologist is blinkered. The gaze is unidimensional, based on the training, based on exposure, based on context. So I do feel there needs to be a challenge. And I mean, one thing you can ask me is why a picture of a sad situation, it's all around you. We are so desensitized, there needs to be this external push or trigger or something else that can change the gaze. That's why I talk about gaze and I talk about triggers. And I like that word of, I can't remember, but being disturbed out of status quo. Because otherwise, whatever your field, you're so caught up with that vision that is the only vision.
Thank you so much. I think we have to move to the end, so we hear the concluding remarks.
Well, we would like to thank you again, our speakers from this interdisciplinary ethics. Dr. Vaz, she brought the importance about humanity plays how humanity plays an important contribution to a more holistic approach to medicine. And Dr. Marta, she also talked about how global business education creates a significant impact of fostering practical skills, adaptability, and global competence. Thank you. And Dr. Alberto García, he presented how education can be enhanced by incorporating the application of beauty, particularly through the lens of bioethics and technology and human behavior. And finally, Dr. Olinda, she brought a very good, very important presentation about virtuous ethics, is how it's important for teaching by emphasizing the importance of character development and role modeling. So thank you very much again for your